Hi, my name is Molly McCanny. I went to Florence, Italy in spring 2015, and I did a third-party provider called SAI. When I packed for Florence, Italy, it was a little bit difficult to decide what exactly I wanted to bring with me because of course, you have the 50-pound limit on the airline, and unless you want to pay. So I picked a couple pairs of pants, a couple sweaters. The hardest part for me was to decide on the shoes. But somehow I managed to do it all. I don't know what to say. A lot of the people in Florence actually speak English, so it wasn't too much of a challenge. But on the flip side, I wish that it was a challenge because I would have loved to challenge myself more as a person to be able to learn the language and to communicate with the locals more on their level instead of relying on them to know English. No, I did not learn Italian before I went to Italy. I do regret that in a sense. I wish that I had taken advantage of my time there, and I wish that I would have taken an Italian class. There was definitely in the back of your head the thought of pickpocketers and theft while walking along the streets. No matter if you're in Italy or Spain or wherever you are in Europe, there's always the thought that it could happen. So what my friends and I would do, we would put our purses more towards the front of our body and kind of just keep it tighter, always zipped up. While I was abroad, I took 4 classes, and 3 out of those 4 classes actually counted towards my major. If someone is concerned about whether their classes will or will not count towards their education, I would say you should meet with an advisor and kind of go over what classes you may need, what classes the program has to offer, and see if those match up. And if they don't match up, then maybe the program isn't the right one. There's so many different programs and so many different options. When I went abroad, my roommates and I went to 9 different countries. To name a few, we went to Ireland for St. Patrick's Day weekend. We went to Barcelona for kind of a long weekend that we had. And we also met up with a bunch of different friends that we had that were studying abroad in different countries. We went to Croatia, and the way we got there was a lot of different methods. We used trains, we used boats, planes, buses. Seriously, you name it, we probably did it. The thing that I love the most about traveling to different countries is probably trying every different type of food, because Spain has their different food, and Italy has wonderful food, I must say. I think that that's probably one of my favorite parts about going to different countries was kind of treating myself out and getting different food, also learning the culture and hearing all these different languages while walking up and down the street. It was crazy to see that because here in America, you walk down the street and you don't hear 10 different languages a day, but in Europe, you can walk down the street and hear 3 or 4 different languages no matter where you are. When I traveled to different countries, I had a travel card the entire time I was abroad, so I would take that with me always, and I would leave other debit cards or credit cards that I had at home, just in case of theft. I would only have X amount of money on my card. Other than that, I would take out some cash, and that would be my budget for the weekend. And I would kind of make a budget to see how much I would need for the weekend, and I would take out X amount of dollars or euros and only use that for that specific weekend, and I couldn't go over it. And that's kind of how I decided to manage my money, so I wouldn't run out of money by the time I left for home. So when I was in Italy, the best way I communicated with my family was probably over FaceTime. So it's kind of hard with the time difference, but we always found a time to FaceTime for however long we wanted to. And then we also had a local phone that we could use to call cabs and restaurants and whatnot and make reservations, but we didn't really need the phone that often. We kind of just managed to get around the city by ourselves, and when we had Wi-Fi, we could text each other if we needed to. But honestly, it was awesome being able to get through my day, not worrying about who's texting me, who's calling me, and whatnot, and the internet, whatever. It just helps you immerse yourself better into the culture.
My name is Max Agner, and I did the faculty-led trip to Brig, Switzerland in January of 2015. So when I was packing for my trip, in Brig, Switzerland, at the school at Cesar Ritz University, you have to wear a suit every day and formal attire. So packing for my trip, I packed a lot of formal clothes, and I just packed everyday clothes. And food-wise for the program there, we got fed every day, so we really just didn't need to bring anything because they had all the supplies in Brig. So at one point during my trip, I did get sick and I visited the local doctor's office in Brig, Switzerland. And the visit was paid for by the school. However, with the medication that they gave me, the expense was on our own. So going on a faculty-led program was really beneficial for me because all the credits were easily transferred over, and I was able to keep on track with my course load. So all the classes that I would have taken if I stayed in Pullman, I was able to take on the faculty-led program at the Cesar Ritz University. So it was really beneficial in keeping on track for graduation and making sure all my credits transferred. And I really enjoyed the faculty-led program because it is a WSU institution, so all the professors there were really helpful. They really wanted to help us, and it was just like here in Pullman, just in a different country. So in regards to the finance aspect of the trip, the total cost for my program was basically the same amount as a tuition as a semester at WSU. So that worked out really well, and I was fortunate enough to pay a lot of extra. And when I was spending, and I made a budget for each weekend that I would use, and I kind of followed that when I was traveling. I had been saving up for about a year for the trip for my spending money. And so I was able to budget that each weekend and make sure I didn't go over that. And having a budget really helped me because I was able to plan out all 13 weeks of my trip and, use my money where I needed to use it, and making sure I didn't spend too much on certain trips. So the language barrier in Switzerland was very interesting because the country basically speaks 3 different languages. And so in Brig, I was kind of in this Swiss German speaking area, but people also spoke a Swiss Italian and a Swiss French. So it was really interesting in trying to adjust to that. Most people in the town knew the basics of English, so you were able to communicate that way. But it was definitely interesting trying to adjust to all these different languages. But it wasn't difficult. You picked up on the basics for each one of them. And once you knew that, communication in Brig wasn't too difficult. My favorite part about studying in Brig was how beautiful it was. You're really in the middle of the mountains, and every day your walk to class, there's these huge, beautiful, snow-topped mountains that you get to look at. And once the weather started getting a little nicer, we were able to take hikes. Skiing was really easy. It was just about a 15-minute train ride from us. So that was really fun. And just being in the middle of the Alps is something that's incredible, and you'll never experience anything like it. So traveling through Switzerland, my group decided to use planes because we thought it was the most efficient way to get to where we wanted to go. We looked into getting a Euro pass. However, we realized with just a short 2-day weekend, traveling by train would take a lot more time and would take away from us exploring the city that we were traveling to. So we decided to use planes, and it really was about the same cost. Flights were anywhere between like $80 and $150, so it was really affordable in that aspect. For communication while studying in Switzerland, I set up a plan with AT&T that gave me a certain amount of phone calls, text messages, and data that I could use. It was just a small amount, but it was really beneficial when we were traveling and lost in a city. I could turn on my data real quick and figure out where we were going. And other than that, I was always just connected to Wi-Fi. It's really convenient over in Europe. Most places have it. And so I was able to communicate just through Wi-Fi on the iPhone. Studying abroad was probably the best decision I've made so far in my life. It was definitely something that I'm going to remember for the rest of my life. And a reason why I loved it so much was just getting to experience so many different cultures. At the school in Brig, Switzerland that I was at, there are students from all over the world and all over Europe, and just getting to interact with those students and learning about their cultures and how they do certain things was very fascinating, and I learned so much just about culture and traveling to different cities.
My name is Taylor McCarthy. I went to the French Riviera during my spring semester of my junior year, and I went through CEA, so program provider. No matter how hard it takes for you to get there, or how much it costs, or what your worries are and what's holding you back, the experience of it is the best experience you'll probably ever have in your entire life. You're going to continue talking about it forever, and it completely changes your world view of everything, but in the best way possible. So if you have the chance to go abroad, you should do it. Pack really lightly, even though you want to bring everything from your room to make it feel like home. You just have to remember that they still have shampoo and basically all the basic necessities that you're gonna need while you're abroad. I don't know, one big jacket, and then you can bring your summer clothes and you can bring winter clothes. You don't need to bring every single pair of clothing that you own in your closet. In the French Riviera, it's really touristy, so there's a lot of British people and Australian people, so it's not hard to speak English with other people and get around, but I've been taking French since I was a freshman in high school, and kind of went back and forth with it, so I knew some of the language before I went, so it didn't make it as hard. And people are a lot friendlier than you think they are. Don't ever bring your passport out at night if you're trying to go out places. Unless maybe if you're in a country like London, they always make sure that you have it. But if you're a girl, always carry your purse in front of you. Don't have a backpack that's really big and easy to open so people can get it. And especially if you know that you're going to a market where there's going to be a big crowd of people, just carry your stuff in the front pockets. Surprisingly enough, CEA made it super easy, so anytime any of us got sick, they would set up the doctor appointment for us. They would just provide us a map and say, if this works with your schedule, go during this time. And luckily enough for us in France, healthcare is free. So even though we were American students and we did pay up front for a copay and for all of our antibiotics, I actually got bronchitis the first week that I was there. They gave me a reimbursement check afterwards, so I actually didn't end up paying for anything while I was there. I specifically chose a program that I knew was going to transfer over. I went to Schema. It was an international business school, so they had business courses and communication courses, which is pretty much right in my field. So right away I went and looked on the website for all the course catalog, and then went to my advisors, and all of them were yep, these would transfer over. Financially, it helped a lot. I did end up having to take out a private loan for it, but there was some savings involved in that too. So if you have a part-time job while you're a student, it helps a lot just because you want to save as much for your trip, especially if you're like me and you want to travel pretty much everywhere. If you want to save more money, I would say travel within your own host country. That's something I wish I would have done more. And when you're taking out a lot of money, just take out a lot of money at once when you use the ATM, so there's less foreign transaction fees. Otherwise, get a credit card that doesn't have any foreign transaction fees. I think one of the biggest culture shocks was going to Germany for the first time. I was so excited, but I didn't realize how the stereotypes of it would actually play out. And the first night we were there, as an American, we got there maybe first out of all the people who were there in the restaurant, and we're the last to get served. Anytime we wanted something, they ignored us until the very, very end. It took us 2.5 hours to get our food. So that was kind of a shock because of the history between America and Germany. And you didn't think it would really play out because it's been so long, but that was probably hard. And we didn't speak the language either. So the fact that we were just Americans, we were students, and they kind of could do what they wanted to do to us. So I really like how big of an emphasis that France, the culture of France, takes on spending time with their family. They're really laid back in the sense that all the retail shops won't open till 10, and when they want to go have lunch with their family, they'll close just because 2 hours is such a good time to have lunch with your family and your friends and catch up with everyone and not actually just eat and not talk to each other. They'll actually talk and catch up. And everything closes by 6 p.m. so that they can all go home and have dinner with their family. But the train system in France was really efficient. Might not always be on time, but it was great to go places. We went to Italy a lot, especially in the French Riviera. The Italian Riviera is maybe 45-minute train ride away, which was awesome because you could go there and buy groceries and then come back. But for the weekend excursions, it's really cheap to fly in Europe, really, really cheap. So a round trip ticket from the south of France to Ireland was only $60 US, which was awesome. So budgeting for that is simple, but budgeting for all the food that you want to try and all the places you want to go, that's the hard part. Skyping and FaceTiming is probably the easiest way once you have Wi-Fi, and in Europe it's way more accessible, I feel like, than it is in other places. But I also got a French phone over there. I needed it for one of my internships, and it's really, really cheap and affordable compared to what it is here. You can even get just like a SIM card from there to put in your iPhone. My favorite part of studying abroad was probably all the friends that I made. I know that sounds really cliche, but I also had a smaller program. There was maybe 35 of us, and we lived in a really small town. So you would see them out and about. We'd all like go grocery shopping together. We'd go like enjoy nightlife together, but at the same time, you get really close to those people just because those are people from the US. Most of them are from the East Coast, and even now it's been like 4 months after the program, and I still talk to like at least 6 people a week just because all of us are like, nobody else is ever gonna understand what we went through, but we all went through it together, so it's cool that we all still get to share that experience.
So my name is Maddie Curry. I did a program provider program called IPSL, and I studied abroad during summer 2015 in Cusco, Peru. Well, I studied abroad for 6 weeks, and then I knew that I would be traveling around the country for 2 weeks after. So I packed pretty light, which I encourage because if you do want to travel after your program ends, that's the best way to do it. So my advice would be to pack as little as you can, and even if you have all of your things set out in front of you, just try and cut it down as much as you can, because you never know if you want to take a trip somewhere and you'll need to just have as little amount of things with you as possible. So yeah, safety, just be smart, be street smart, don't flaunt your valuables, don't make things obvious to where you have them, and health-wise, don't be afraid to go ask for help, and be aware of where all the clinics are in your city, and also that you can go to pharmacies as well. I took 2 classes, so I guess my first bit of advice would be to not overwhelm yourself with credits, because you also want to have time for having fun, because you are going to this place to see and be involved in where you are rather than just totally being immersed in your studies. So I took Spanish, and then I took an elective, which my program required me to take. So for Spanish, it was really amazing because the teachers, they pretty much only teach Spanish, and so I learned so much more than I ever could have here. I wouldn't worry about it. I've had multiple people tell me not to worry about your transcripts getting transferred or your credits getting transferred, because they will figure that out. You did the time, you took classes, they will make sure that the hours get transferred over to the credits that you've taken, and I had absolutely no problem with that at all. So I am paying for my program through financial aid, which I think is a great option because it gives you the option to go to a different country while still being able to pay for it later, which can be stressful, but that's money. So when I got there, the currency in Peru is about a third of the rate it is in the States, so everything was really, really cheap. And what also helped was doing a homestay. So most of my meals were paid for. I only really needed to pay for anything on the weekends when I went out for drinks with friends or when I wanted to buy souvenirs. It wasn't a problem at all, and I only paid with cash most of the time. I didn't really trust anybody with my card, and also the people there, they really like their cash money, so I only took cash out of ATMs, and when I did, it wasn't very large bills because you don't want to advertise that to people hanging around the ATMs. The thing that stood out the most to me was just how nice everybody was and how willing anybody was to talk to you and help you. The diversity there is amazing. There's the people that are still there from Inca times. There's, people there from conquistador times. It's just a melting pot, really, of all sorts of cultures. And what I loved the most about it was that there's basically 3 different environments. There's the Amazon, and then there's the Andes Mountains, and then there's the coast. So basically you get jungle, mountains, and desert all in one, and in a country that's like smaller than Texas. So that was really awesome to just be able to say, hey, I want to go to the Amazon one weekend and actually be able to do that, or hey, I want to go to Machu Picchu one weekend and actually be able to do that too. And it was just a really amazing experience, and I just loved the people. I learned so much Spanish, and the food was out of this world amazing. I guess they apparently invented French fries, so French fries were a big deal. And being able to learn and everything about it was absolutely wonderful.
So I'm Tiara Webb. I studied abroad in Brussels, Belgium with CIEE. I went spring 2015. And I'm a senior here at WSU studying journalism and media production. Belgium has 3 official languages, French, Dutch, and German. I can speak French. I did some classes before I went to Belgium, but also I took a class there, and I stayed with a host family, so I was able to practice my French a lot, and I made friends with locals, so I was able to use my French. There were times when I went to the northern parts of Belgium where it's predominantly Dutch speaking, where it was some miscommunication, but for most of the time they spoke English too, and they wanted to practice the English, so it made communication pretty easy. But it's pretty easy to get medication if you are sick, and with my program, we were connected to a bigger university, and so that allowed for easy healthcare, and it was only 20 euros for doctor's appointments and things like that. And I knew other people that got sick, but they said the health system there was pretty good. So safety-wise, I felt pretty safe in Belgium. It wasn't really scary at all. So just sign up with the security email so that you're up to date on what's going on in the country. And then I think a pickpocket, I would highly suggest if you're planning on taking electronics, don't have them out in the open, but just be wary of your surroundings. I feel like you can tell if you could see someone acting strange, then don't go near them, I guess. But overall, I felt pretty safe. Okay. Well, I took 5 classes while I was studying abroad at Vesalius College, and the transfer of credits was pretty easy. I did take classes from my major and minor, as well as just a random elective, which was my language class. But I took communication classes, and there were some that were the exact same at WSU, so that was really nice too. And then I really talked to my advisors, both my global studies minor advisor as well as my own communications advisor, and so we really talked that out. But I'm also the type of person that looks into detail if that credit works here, and so yeah. But it's pretty easy, and studying abroad with CIEE, they handled everything with me. I stayed in contact with them to see, when do you think it will come? But they were pretty efficient. So just when you're choosing your program, just talk to them about how credits transfer over. But they're pretty efficient with that stuff. So for funding for my program, I applied for a lot of scholarships, and I got 3. 2 from WSU, and then 1 for my actual program, CIEE, so that was really helpful. And so what I was able to save from those scholarships, I kept to the side. And then, let's see, what else did I do? It's easy to get overboard with how close you are to different countries, and you're like, I want to go here, here, here. But I set up a maximum for myself, so I said I was only going to 5 countries, and so don't try to choose a transportation that may be the quickest, but could be the most expensive. Like, for instance, decided to go to London, and I took, it was probably like a 6-hour bus ride, but it's like from the west side to Pullman, so it's like really not that bad. And it cost me like about 30 euros, and so that was like really nice, rather than taking like a 100 € flight. And so just look at other options besides like planes or things like that. But Ryanair is also really good. Shout out to Ryanair. The low budget flights are really good, and just plan ahead if you are planning on traveling. But also, it's fun to go abroad to all these other countries, but definitely check inside of the country that you're going to, and like realize that you can go 20 euros to a different country, or use those 20 euros and go on a 10 € train ride in your country and use the 10 euros for a meal. So it's definitely like just try to get the most out of your experience, but also like watch out for your budget, I guess. I guess what I really love about Brussels is the fact that it's really diverse, not only language-wise, but culture-wise. There's like people from all over the place, and went to Mons, which is like maybe like an hour from Brussels, and that was one of the cultural centers for Europe. And so I went there by myself, but it was cool. They had art exhibits there, and I also went to it's called Banch, and we went for Mardi Gras, and it's this huge like World UNESCO Heritage Site, and it was really beautiful there to see the culture. And it was the French region of Belgium, so that was really cool to check out. I think that's what I really loved about Belgium, is like the fact that you can go an hour north and you're in a predominantly Dutch-speaking area, then you can go south and you're in a predominantly French-speaking area, and then you go to the east and the east side, and it's a German population, and so it's like really cool to see how all those how they all work together. And it's completely different, because you can tell as soon as like you cross over that everything's in Dutch or everything's in French. But it's really cool, because then you can like truly appreciate the history of like how the country came to be and things like that.
So while I was in Mexico, I didn't have a lot of communication with my family back at home. It was mostly just through email when I did have a Wi-Fi connection, or when I was in class and I could use the computers there. And then sometimes I would call them, because the house that I was staying at, they did have a home phone, but I didn't want to run up a large bill by calling the United States a lot. So it was mostly just by email and just checking in and just letting them know that I'm still alive and that I'm having a great time and that I miss them. And yeah, that was mostly it. So my name's Eve, and I studied abroad in Mexico City the summer of 2015, and I'm a senior right now. So I definitely had some issues with the language barrier, and I got a minor in Spanish. I have one now, and I finished it while I was there. So I had taken a bit of Spanish before I went, but there's really nothing that can prepare you for the way that people actually speak in their native countries. And so it was pretty difficult to go and just try and have conversations with people, because the speed that they speak at and the slang was really difficult to pick up. And for the first couple weeks that I was there, I was like exhausted by the end of the day, because I did a direct enrollment program where I just enrolled in the university there, so I was surrounded by Spanish all day, every day. And it was so difficult to translate in my head all the time. But after like the first month, I kind of started to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and I was really able to like actually understand what people were saying and like actually have a full conversation with people. But it took about a month of taking Spanish classes there, as well as just like interacting with people all the time. When I went, I did a direct enrollment program. And so I was taking Spanish immersion classes for international students. So I was in a class with Russians, people from Belgium, another American, as well as some people from England, and we were all there doing this immersion program to learn Spanish. And so it was difficult to have the credits transferred, and so the most important thing before you go is to plan and to research the university that you want to go to, reach out to academic coordinators that run like the exchange programs, and get as much information about the classes as you can. So then you can go to your counselors here and be like, I'm going to take these 3 classes. And they can be like, okay, well, let's compare them to the syllabus and see if they're actually going to be transferable, if they actually are going to cover the material that you need to have covered. And so that's definitely the most important thing I thought was planning, looking forward, really researching the institution that you're going to and really getting to know what classes you're going to be taking before you go and have all of the paperwork filled out before you leave. And I would definitely recommend doing a direct enrollment program just because you get a really different feel for the university there and you really get to know people on a different level and like be working with professors who are like born and raised in the country that you're from and have a very different teaching style from US professors. So while I was down there, I didn't really budget or anything, and I'm really fortunate that my parents really support me having an international experience. So they paid for everything when I went down there, and while I was there, I didn't use a credit card or anything just because I did not want to carry it around with me because there is such a risk of pickpocketing in Mexico City, and so I used mostly cash. And when I would go out on the weekends, either around in the city or into the surrounding towns, I would only take as much money as I expected to spend. So I would take like 50 to 60 pesos because I knew I would buy a meal, and then maybe like an extra 60 pesos if I wanted to buy something. And I always kept extra cash around because I was taking public transportation, so you always had to have change to get onto the bus and onto the metro. And I never really like specifically budgeted or anything. I just kind of winged it and watched my spending and made sure that I didn't get swindled into buying something that was really expensive for tourists. And I tried to eat like a local, live like a local, and hang out with my friends who were Mexicans who were my age, and just go to where they were going and trying to avoid the more expensive touristy, nicer restaurants and buying street tacos and stuff like that. That was a lot cheaper. For the direct enrollment program, especially in Mexico, it was way cheaper than staying at WSU. My tuition was around $200 for the entire summer, and my textbooks cost about $14. And so that obviously is much less expensive than universities in the United States. And the big expenses just came from like going out and doing excursions on the weekends and going and doing things, then of course airfare. And even though those were both pretty expensive, I would say that it's absolutely worth it. And having these international experiences and knowing people in different countries and just learning about the cultures and really just learning about so many different things when you actually go to this country versus just seeing, learning about a country in a class or a presentation is really just always worth any money that you're going to put towards it. So I definitely travel a lot, mostly on the weekends. And so Mexico City is a massive, massive, massive city, but it's really fortunate that they have an amazing metro system. So you can go to pretty much all corners of the city on the metro, and it takes, it'll take you 2 hours to get from one end to the other, but you can get pretty much anywhere. And then if you want to get out of the city, so when I was there, I would go into small towns because Mexico City is in the mountainous region. And so when the Spaniards came to settle Mexico, they dictated that small towns in the mountains would be producing only one specific thing. Like one would be mining for gold and silver, one would be producing linen, one would be farming for cocoa beans and different things like that. So each town in the mountains outside Mexico City has a lot of their own unique culture. And this government of Mexico really wants to encourage people to go experience that. So at the ends of all the metros, there's actually huge bus stations that you can go and you just buy a ticket, and the buses will take you into all of these small towns. They'll go all over the mountains. They'll take you to like the pyramids at like Teotihuacan, which are some of the largest pyramids in the world. And so when I was traveling, I was really just using the public transportation. I would sometimes take taxis, but they're very expensive. And because I look like an American, they would jack up the price, and they wouldn't charge me as much as they would charge a Mexican. So I would try to avoid those, but I was really fortunate that traveling within the city and outside of the city is very cheap. It'd be $5 or $6 for a bus ticket, and you could go 45 miles on that. So when I was planning my weekend trips, again, I would just take out as much cash as I expected to need, a little bit extra for spending, and then a little bit extra in case I did get stranded somewhere or if I wanted to take a taxi home. And yeah, and some tips for people that are going to go study abroad, I would say definitely do your research about where you're going, know the weather patterns, know how people dress, just because you don't want to stand out more than you already are. And a lot of countries are much more conservative than Americans, and if you're going to go out even to class, you're expected to look nice. And if you wear like sweats or yoga pants, like People are going to really stare at you. And I would say definitely get to know as many people as you can there, because people are really, even though I know a lot of people talk about how America has a bad stigma around the world, people are usually generally really excited to meet an American and to get to know you. And so I would say really just like reach out to people and try to get involved when you're there. My favorite thing about studying abroad is really kind of seeing a totally different side of the country and the people, and just getting to know them on an individual level, and just seeing that even though there might be kind of like all these stereotypes about like what, you know, Mexicans do and what they eat and how they hang out with each other, and just getting to know people and being like, wow, like everything I knew was completely wrong. And really just realizing that, you know, they're just like teenagers and college students just like us, and just want to have a good time and are super welcoming and were so excited to see me. And I loved seeing how excited they were to share their culture and what they like to do with an American, and be like, hey, like you're here now, you're one of us, and you're going to see how we live. And so that was, I think, definitely my favorite part, was really just being able to jump like 2 feet in and having these wonderful people that reached out to me and were like, hey, like throw away everything that you think you know, and we're going to show you what it's really like.